The council chamber was a vast expanse of shimmering glass and polished metal, a place where the fate of entire star systems was decided by the flick of a hand or the stroke of a pen. Today, however, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The seats around the central table were filled with representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species: the towering insectoid Quorath, the sleek, telepathic Ervans, the amphibious Drellani, and the Vraxians, whose crimson exoskeletons gleamed like a predator's under the artificial light. At the head of the table sat the council speaker, a neutral entity created by the collective species for one purpose: to maintain order. But today, order seemed elusive. Ambassador Jake Mallory stood at the podium, his hands steady as he addressed the assembly. The young human had been thrust into this role after Earth's admission to the Galactic Council, a historic achievement in itself, considering the galactic power's deep mistrust of humanity. Earth had made waves on the interstellar scene with a string of unlikely victories against alien invaders, but many still saw the humans as an upstart species, too volatile and unpredictable to trust. His voice, calm but firm, echoed through the chamber, his words slicing through the rising murmur of alien voices. We are here today to assert that Earth is a sovereign member of the Galactic Council. Our rights are not negotiable, and the proposal set forth by the Vraxian delegation to limit our autonomy is unacceptable. A collective hiss echoed from the Vraxian contingent, led by General Sorath, the imposing commander whose red eyes never wavered from Mallory's face. His expression was one of disdain, but his words carried the weight of centuries of military superiority. Ambassador Mallory, Sorath began, his voice a low growl, "Your species has no place in this council. You have proven to be an unpredictable force, chaotic, reckless, and unable to cooperate. It is only a matter of time before your actions jeopardize the safety of the entire galaxy." Jake remained unmoved, but the Vraxian's words stung, and the room fell silent. He knew the history. The Vraxians had once tried to colonize Earth, only to be repelled by humanity's unexpected resilience. A series of failed invasions, each met with brutal resistance, had left the Vraxians bitter and distrustful of Earth's potential. The Ervans spoke next, their tall, delicate forms seeming to shimmer with an ethereal grace. Ambassador Ilyasa, their representative, addressed the room with a calm that contrasted sharply with the Vraxians' aggression. The proposal to curtail Earth's autonomy has gained widespread support among several of the Council's most influential members. While we acknowledge your capabilities, Ambassador Mallory, the larger concern is your species' ability to maintain order. History has shown us that those who cannot control their passions are a danger to others. Jake clenched his jaw. The Ervans were not wrong. Humanity's history was a testament to both its triumphs and its destructive impulses. Wars, conflicts, and an unyielding thirst for freedom had shaped them into a force unlike any other in the galaxy. But it was that very force that had earned Earth a place at this table. Humanity had survived where others would have fallen. They had turned the tides in battles against far superior alien forces. The galaxy underestimated them at its peril. "I'll remind you, Ambassador Ilyasa," Jake said, his voice unwavering, that the Galactic Council is not a place for fear or submission. It is a place for cooperation, an equal partnership among free species. Humanity has earned its seat here, and we will not be treated as second-class citizens. A sudden sharp tone cut through the room, signaling that the debate was about to reach a conclusion. The speaker, a neutral figure who had not yet spoken, looked down at the assembled representatives. Enough, the speaker's voice resonated through the chamber. The proposal is under review. We shall vote in 1 hour. As the murmurs resumed, Jake Mallory turned slowly, his eyes meeting the Vraxians once more. There was no fear in his gaze, only resolve. He knew the next few hours could decide the fate of humanity. But no matter what happened, he had no intention of letting Earth fall under anyone's control again. The storm was only beginning. The moment the council meeting adjourned, Jake Mallory returned to the human enclave, a secure section of the council building where Earth's diplomats could retreat and regroup. He moved quickly, his mind already racing ahead. The hour-long voting session was a mere formality. The proposal to strip Earth of its autonomy had overwhelming support from the Council, led by the Vraxians and their allies. There was no mistaking it. Earth was about to lose its place among the stars. But Jake knew something the others did not. Beneath the surface of Earth's government, in the hidden halls of military command and secret research facilities, the Human Defense Initiative, HDI, had spent decades preparing for a day like this. The HDI was a covert organization, an elite group of human military leaders, scientists, and engineers who had secretly pushed humanity to the brink of technological superiority. Earth's newfound seat on the Council was no accident. It was part of a larger plan. The goal wasn't just survival in the galaxy. It was to make sure humanity would never again be marginalized. Jake was the liaison between Earth's leadership and the HDI, but even he hadn't known the full extent of their preparations. He had only received a brief, encrypted message moments before the council meeting started, confirming that the first phase of Earth's countermeasure was underway. "Sir, we need to talk." A voice interrupted his thoughts. Turning, Jake saw Captain Linda Harris, one of the HDI's key operatives, walking briskly toward him. She was tall, with short cropped hair and a face that bore the scars of several close calls in battle. In her hand was a data pad, and the urgency in her eyes was unmistakable. "What is it, Captain?" "Phase 1 is complete. Our fleet has launched," Harris said, barely pausing to catch her breath. "The stealth ships are on their way to their target zones. The Vraxian fleet won't know what hit them." Jake felt his pulse quicken, but he held his composure. The HDI's secret fleet of advanced warships, outfitted with cloaking technology and weapons designed to disrupt the most sophisticated alien defenses, had been in preparation for years. No one outside the initiative knew the full scope of what Earth had been capable of building. Their advantage lay not in sheer numbers, but in surprise, and technology that the galaxy had never seen before. "Do we have confirmation on the EMP deployment?" Jake asked, his mind already moving ahead to the next phase. "Confirmed. The quantum disruptors are in position. All Vraxian communications should be compromised in the next few hours. They won't be able to coordinate their fleets or call for reinforcements." "Perfect," Jake said, feeling a strange surge of vindication. He had argued for Earth's autonomy with every ounce of his energy during the council debate, but he knew words alone would never win the day. It was action that mattered. Earth would show them what it was made of. "I'll head to the command center," Jake said, glancing at the clock. "When Phase 2 hits, we'll need to be ready to move fast. I don't want to be caught in the middle of this with no backup." Linda gave him a curt nod. "Understood. I'll get the fleet status updated, but be ready for anything. The Vraxians won't go down easily." As Jake left the enclave, his mind raced. There was no turning back now. The plan had begun, and the Vraxians would soon know that humanity was no longer a pawn on the galactic chessboard. Earth had made its first move, and it was a declaration of war. The first Vraxian response came faster than expected. In the cold reaches of space, the Vraxian flagship Dominance, an enormous warship with weapons that could obliterate planets, sped toward Earth's orbital defenses. Inside, General Tsorath and his crew were already preparing for their next strike. They had underestimated humanity once, but that would not happen again. They would teach these primitive humans a lesson they would never forget. But as Dominance neared Earth's orbit, something unexpected happened. A sudden, crippling shockwave of electromagnetic pulses blanketed the entire Vraxian fleet. Communications flickered and died, weapons systems went dark, and ships began to lose power. The galaxy would soon learn that Earth's response was not one of desperation, but of deadly precision. The sudden blackout of the Vraxian fleet sent waves of confusion rippling through their command structure. For the first time in years, the once invincible Vraxians were fighting blind. Their flagship, Dominance, shuddered as its communications array faltered. The entire fleet, once coordinated with deadly precision, was now rendered a disorganized mass of scattered ships. Panic began to spread among the Vraxian commanders, each scrambling to regain control. General Tsorath's roar of frustration echoed throughout the Bridge of Dominance. What is happening? His massive red-clad figure stormed across the room, his claws digging into the armrests of his chair as he snarled orders in rapid Vraxian. His crew worked frantically, trying to restore power to their systems, but the EMP bursts were relentless. The weapons systems, once prepared to unleash annihilation, were now completely offline. "This is impossible," a lieutenant stammered, looking up from the diagnostic screen. "It's not a traditional EMP. We can't even trace the source." Tsorath spun on him, fury in his eyes. "Find it. We didn't come this far to be outwitted by primitive tactics." In the heart of the Earth fleet, Captain Linda Harris watched with grim satisfaction as the Vraxian ships floundered. The quantum disruptors that had been deployed in secret had done their job. Every single Vraxian vessel, large and small, was now blinded and immobilized. The humans had hacked the Vraxian communications grid and disabled their navigational systems, rendering their ships vulnerable. Jake Mallory stood at the command center on Earth, eyes fixed on the real-time data streaming in. He could hardly believe how swiftly the tide had turned. The Vraxians were a force to be reckoned with, a cold, calculating empire of warships and soldiers who had dominated for millennia. And yet, in a few short hours, there might have been reduced to nothing more than an uncoordinated mess. "This is it," Jake said, his voice calm but heavy with purpose. "Phase 2 is a go. We can't afford to waste this opportunity." Linda's voice crackled over the comms. "Understood. Our fleet is ready to engage. We've got them on the ropes, but we need to hit hard before they recover. We're launching the attack now." The human fleet, though smaller in number, had been built with a singular purpose: to strike swiftly and decisively. Advanced stealth ships, invisible to the most sophisticated sensors, slipped past the remnants of the Vraxian blockade like ghosts. Hidden in the shadows of space, they prepared to unleash the full power of Earth's new arsenal. On Earth's surface, preparations were underway for the next phase. Ground-based defense units activated, mobilizing autonomous drones, weaponized satellites, and anti-orbital platforms. The Vraxians had never considered the possibility that humanity could fight back this aggressively, let alone on multiple fronts. Back in deep space, Linda Harris's fleet moved in, targeting the Vraxian flagship *Dominance* with surgical precision. A trio of cloaked human warships emerged from the shadows, their quantum torpedoes locked and loaded. The first strike hit *Dominance's lower hull with an explosive force that sent shockwaves through the ship, sending sparks flying across its darkened control room. General Xoroth was thrown from his command chair as the ship lurched violently. His eyes burned with rage. Who dares? But it was too late. The humans had already struck again, their stealth ships delivering a barrage of quantum energy weapons directly to the heart of the Vraxian flagship. A second, more devastating blast tore through Dominance, rupturing its reactor core. Retreat. Xoroth screamed, but it was already over. The Vraxian flagship exploded in a flash of blinding light, its massive hull disintegrating into space debris. Across the fleet, Vraxian ships began to falter. With their flagship destroyed and their communications down, the Vraxians could no longer coordinate their defense. One by one, they were picked off, their once mighty warships falling prey to the relentless precision of Earth's newly formed fleet. The galaxy had always underestimated humanity, and now they would see what happened when you pushed a species to its breaking point. On Earth, as the first victory echoed across the stars, Jake Mallory allowed himself a rare, fleeting moment of triumph. The war had only just begun, but the first strike had been humanity's. And the Vraxians would never forget who they were dealing with. The shockwave of the Dominance's destruction reverberated through the entire Vraxian fleet. In a matter of hours, the once immense and seemingly indomitable Vraxian war machine had crumbled, leaving behind a scattered, disoriented force. General Xoroth's survival was a bitter reminder of humanity's message. No one was invincible. His escape pod had been found drifting in the void of space, and while the Vraxians rallied their remaining ships, they knew that a devastating blow had been dealt to their pride and their power. Xoroth's immediate orders were to regroup, but his mind was clouded with anger and humiliation. A species as primitive as humanity had struck them down so easily, and he vowed to ensure that Earth would pay the price for this insolence. Back on Earth, Jake Mallory stood on the balcony of the Earth Command Center, staring out at the vastness of space. His fingers lightly gripped the railing as he processed the last few hours of chaos. The enemy had been scattered, but the fight was far from over. The Vraxians would retaliate, of that he was certain. Their pride, their very existence depended on maintaining their dominance. They would regroup, they would strike back, and they would not forgive Earth's audacity. But what the Vraxians didn't understand yet was that the humans had no intention of stopping. Jake's communicator buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. It was Linda Harris. "Sir, we've intercepted a transmission. The Vraxians are reassembling their fleet, larger than we anticipated. They're sending reinforcements. It's clear they won't back down without a fight." Jake's gaze hardened. The first victory had been theirs, but now humanity had to decide if it was willing to follow through. If the Vraxians were willing to escalate, so would Earth. "We've prepared for this," Jake replied, his voice steady. "It's time we show them just how far humanity is willing to go to protect its future." On the edge of Vraxian space, the remnants of the Vraxian fleet gathered like a cornered animal preparing to strike. Their military commanders had been called in from across the galaxy. The Vraxian Empire would not allow itself to be humiliated. They would retake what was theirs and crush the humans who dared challenge them. But they had no idea what awaited them. As the Vraxian reinforcements jumped into the system, they found nothing. The human fleet was gone. No trace of the stealth ships, no sign of the previous strikes, just a vast, eerie emptiness. It was a trap, and they had walked right into it. Jake Mallory watched from Earth's command center, his eyes scanning the fleet's movements in real time. He stood with his senior staff, his jaw set. "Activate the Phase 2 assets," he ordered calmly. "It's time we make our move." The quiet hum of the system's power grid filled the room as a massive counterstrike unfolded. From hidden launch stations deep within the asteroid belts of Earth's solar system, the quantum torpedoes were deployed. These weapons, created with stolen alien technology, had been optimized over the last few years. When they detonated, they wouldn't simply destroy the ships. They would create massive gravitational anomalies that would tear apart the very fabric of space itself, distorting time and space around the targets. In an instant, the first Vraxian cruiser disappeared. The gravitational field caused a chain reaction, causing a half-dozen ships to warp out of existence in an unimaginable storm of energy. Across the galaxy, the human message rang out. Earth would no longer cower in the shadows. The Vraxians had underestimated humanity once. They would never make that mistake again. Back on Earth, Jake Mallory sent out a final communication to the Galactic Council, addressing them with a clarity that left no room for doubt. Consider this a warning to all who would seek to impose their will on us. Earth is not your enemy, but make no mistake, if you push us, we will defend ourselves with everything we have. As the galaxy watched, a new era began to dawn, one where humanity would not be defined by its weakness, but by its unyielding strength. The Vraxian response came swiftly and with terrifying force. Less than a day after the destruction of their reinforcements, the Vraxians mobilized their most powerful remaining fleet. The flagship Vengeance, a towering leviathan of war, arrived in Earth's system, flanked by an armada of dreadnoughts and attack cruisers. The Vraxians had swallowed their pride and were ready for retribution. The human fleet, still reeling from the sudden onslaught of their quantum weapons, now faced the full wrath of the Vraxian Empire. General Xoroth had sworn vengeance for the loss of dominance, and his hatred burned with a cold, calculating fury. This time, there would be no mercy. Earth had struck first, but the Vraxians would make sure it was their last. From Earth's command center, Jake Mallory stood in front of the massive display screens, watching the real-time data. His mind was sharp, calculating. He knew the Vraxians were coming. He could feel the growing pressure, the weight of the moment. Earth had no choice but to fight. If they hesitated, it would be the end of humanity's dream of sovereignty. "We've underestimated them before," Jake muttered under his breath. "We won't do it again." Linda Harris, her face pale but determined, stood beside him. "The Vengeance is unlike anything we faced before, sir. It's capable of wiping out entire continents with a single strike. We've got one shot to stop it." Jake nodded, his hands tight on the edge of the command console. "And we'll make that shot count." Earth's fleet had barely 20 warships left, far fewer than the Vraxian armada. But the human fleet had one thing the Vraxians didn't: strategy. Earth's fleet was designed for hit-and-run tactics, with stealth capabilities and quantum weapons that could incapacitate even the most formidable ships. The first phase had been a success, but the true test was now upon them. The Vraxians were no longer the scattered, demoralized force they had been. They were united, focused, and hell-bent on exterminating the human threat once and for all. The space between the two forces began to close. The Earth fleet, knowing they couldn't win in a direct engagement, began to scatter, using their cloaking systems to stay hidden in the dense asteroid fields just outside the planet's orbit. They'd learned one valuable lesson from the Vraxians: never fight fair. "We need to stall them," Linda said. "Buy time for our backup plans to take effect." Jake exhaled sharply. "Get the quantum disruptors ready. We'll need them as a last resort." Meanwhile, on the surface of Earth, tensions were reaching a boiling point. News of the escalating conflict had spread across the globe, and nations, formerly divided, were now uniting under a singular cause: survival. Governments began pulling together resources, organizing military forces, and fortifying key strategic sites. Civilians, too, rallied, converting factories and even schools into defensive hubs. The unity among the people was unprecedented. In the streets of every major city, citizens wore the same expressions of grim determination. But this wasn't just a fight for Earth. It was a fight for humanity's future in the galaxy. Back in space, the Vraxian fleet made its move. Vengeance led the charge, its enormous guns glowing with lethal energy as it powered toward Earth. But as it entered range, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. The human fleet, once scattered, was now regrouping for one last desperate stand. Jake watched as the first wave of Vraxian firepower began to land. The space around Earth's orbital defenses lit up with blinding flashes of energy. Earth's ships fought back with everything they had, but their numbers were dwarfed by the Vraxian armada. In the blink of an eye, 2 of Earth's warships were reduced to dust, and several others were severely damaged. "This is it," Jake said quietly. "It's all or nothing." Linda's voice came over the comms, steel in her tone. "We've got them. Phase 3 is online." A massive energy pulse surged out from Earth's final line of defense, sweeping toward the Vraxian fleet. It was the culmination of years of research, a device capable of temporarily distorting the gravitational fields around enemy ships, throwing their weapons offline and scattering their fleet into disarray. For a moment, the Vraxians hesitated. The pulse hit, and the Vengeance faltered. Its massive weapon shut down, its shields flickering out of existence. The first of the dreadnoughts veered off course, its engines spinning out of control. "Now," Jake shouted, his voice echoing across the command room. "Hit them with everything we've got." Earth's remaining warships, now fully cloaked, moved in for the final strike. Quantum torpedoes, laden with the destructive energy of subspace anomalies, tore through the Vraxian formation. The first dreadnought exploded in a brilliant flash, its hull torn apart by the cascade of energy. But as Vengeance rallied, its guns flared back to life. The battle was far from over. With Earth's survival hanging in the balance, every second felt like an eternity. The fight was not only for the planet, but for the very soul of humanity's place in the stars. In the cold vastness of space, Earth's fate would be decided in the fires of battle, and nothing would be the same afterward. The Vengeance roared back to life, its massive guns firing in quick succession, and the silence that had briefly held the battlefield shattered. The Vraxians, now fully recovered from the initial shock, were not willing to let Earth's brief moment of glory become the defining moment of the war. They struck with a vengeance, literal and metaphorical, firing on Earth's defense satellites and launching salvos of missiles aimed directly at the planet's surface. From the command center, Jake Mallory's eyes flicked across the screen, watching the trajectory of the incoming fire. The sheer force of it made the air feel thick, the pressure mounting in his chest, as if he were personally being crushed under the weight of the Vraxian retaliation. He could feel the tide shifting, just as he had feared. Despite all their preparation, despite the bold strikes against the Vraxian fleet, Earth was not yet in the clear. "Sir," Linda Harris's voice broke through the tension, "our orbital defenses are holding for now. But if Vengeance continues this onslaught, we'll be outgunned. The other ships are too damaged to provide significant backup." Jake clenched his jaw. He knew that Earth's military strength was still growing, but they were no match for the full might of the Vraxian fleet. They couldn't afford a prolonged engagement. The destruction of Earth's orbital stations, key infrastructure, and military bases would cripple their capacity to resist. time was running out. "We need to end this now," Jake said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "Send the signal. Prepare the final phase." High above Earth's atmosphere, the remaining human warships moved into position. Their cloaking devices flickered on and off as they maneuvered, dodging Vraxian fire, just barely skimming the edges of the larger fleet. Captain Linda Harris's flagship, the Defender, was leading the charge, its advanced AI guiding it through the chaos of battle. Despite the destruction around them, Linda held her focus. She sent the encrypted message to Earth's command center, Phase 4 activation, final assault. It was the last card in humanity's hand. A final gambit that would either end the war or end humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Jake didn't flinch when the message came through. It was time to deliver the blow. He leaned over the console, pressing a sequence of buttons that activated the last phase of Earth's master plan. A pulse of energy surged from Earth's surface, rippling outward, vibrating the very air in space. The pulse was not a weapon of destruction. It was far worse. A colossal electromagnetic wave, unlike anything the Vraxians had encountered, was unleashed. It was designed to disrupt every piece of advanced Vraxian technology, from their shields to their weaponry, to their most sophisticated military strategies. For a brief moment, the galaxy's edge seemed to shimmer, the fabric of space itself bending as the pulse expanded outward. The Vraxian fleet was immediately affected. Systems shut down. Shields flickered. The weapons that had once been capable of vaporizing entire fleets sputtered and died. Even the massive Vengeance, which had seemed unstoppable only moments before, was caught in the wave. Its engines flared briefly, then stuttered, leaving it adrift in space. Inside Vengeance, General Soroth's rage reached a fever pitch. "What is this?" His fists slammed onto the control panel as the lights in the command center flickered. The Vraxian crew scrambled to regain control of the ship, but every system was malfunctioning. Even their once pristine targeting systems were misfiring, their weapons now firing wildly into empty space. Soroth's mind raced. He had seen something like this once before, in ancient texts, an ancient weapon capable of disrupting entire fleets. But it had been lost to history. Humanity had somehow recreated it, and now they were using it to decimate his forces. "We've been outplayed," Soroth hissed, his voice low and filled with venom. "They've crippled us." Back on Earth, the command center erupted into a storm of activity. The pulse had worked. The Vraxians were in disarray. The remaining human warships, using their cloaking systems to full advantage, launched a series of pinpoint strikes against the crippled fleet, their quantum torpedoes hitting the most vulnerable targets: power reactors, communications relays, and control centers. One by one, the Vraxian ships began to disintegrate, their once formidable might shattered by humanity's final strike. But Jake knew this wasn't over. The Vraxians were still powerful, still dangerous, and they would fight to the bitter end. Vengeance was not destroyed, not yet. The war had reached its most desperate point, and only one side would emerge victorious. "Keep pushing," Jake said, his voice resolute. "We're not done yet. Not until they're gone." The battle was far from finished, but humanity had sent its message. Earth was no longer the underdog, no longer the victim. In the cold darkness of space, it had become the hunter, and the Vraxians had no idea what was coming next. The pulse that had crippled the Vraxian fleet was only the beginning. While the immediate effects were undeniable, the Vraxians weren't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Inside the Vengeance, General Soroth's hands gripped the shattered console, his knuckles white with fury. The damage was severe, but not irreparable. The electromagnetic pulse had disrupted the fleet's communications and navigational systems, but it hadn't obliterated everything. The Vraxians were adaptable, resilient, and above all, they would not let Earth's temporary advantage become their defeat. "We're not done yet," Dorothy growled, standing tall despite the chaos in his command center. "Reinforcements are en route. We have backup ships on standby. This war is far from over." The Vraxians, battered and bruised, began to rally their remaining ships. Their commanders, long trained in the brutal art of war, responded to the crisis with the precision of a dying beast, lashing out in its final moments. They began to reorganize, activating their emergency systems and preparing to launch a counterattack. Vengeance, though wounded, had enough firepower left to make Earth pay for its insolence. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Captain Linda Harris watched as the remaining human ships engaged the disoriented Vraxian forces. The battle was chaotic. Dreadnoughts and attack cruisers still tangled in fierce combat, with explosions lighting up the vacuum of space. For a moment, it seemed as though the Vraxians were about to regain control. But then came the unexpected. A flash of light brighter than anything seen before erupted from deep within the Vraxian fleet. It was the last-ditch move, the desperate weapon that Earth had hoped to avoid. The Vraxians had activated their doomsday device, a quantum singularity generator, an experimental weapon capable of creating a mini black hole that would pull everything in its radius into oblivion. The device had been in development for years, hidden away in the darkest reaches of Vraxian space, and now it was their final card. Linda's eyes widened in horror as the device powered up, a swirling vortex of gravity forming around the Vengeance. "They're going to take us all with them," she shouted into her comms. "Activate the failsafe." Jake Mallory, standing in the command center, watched the unfolding disaster with grim determination. The Vraxians had finally revealed their trump card, but Earth had its own. A failsafe system, embedded deep within the quantum disruptors, was designed to stop just such a weapon. But the window of opportunity to trigger it was closing fast. "Activate the core," Jake ordered coldly. "Now." On the bridge of the Defender, Linda barely had time to respond before the ship's AI initiated the failsafe protocol. In the heart of the ship's engine room, the quantum core pulsed, sending a resonant signal through the fleet. The human warships, still cloaked, began to converge on the Vengeance and its quantum singularity device. The core was designed to counteract the singularity's pull, to twist the fabric of space just enough to destabilize the black hole's creation. But it was a gamble. The energy requirements were beyond what Earth's ships could handle. One miscalculation, and the entire fleet would be caught in the event horizon. As Linda's ship hurtled toward the Vraxian weapon, she gritted her teeth. Come on, come on. The energy surge from Earth's core was massive, an overwhelming wave of quantum energy that shot through space like a living thing. The fabric of space itself seemed to warp as the fields collided. The Vengeance's singularity generator, destabilized by the counterforce, began to flicker wildly, its gravitational field twisting in on itself. Then, with a force that shook the stars themselves, the device imploded. But rather than consuming everything in its path, it collapsed inward, dragging only the Vraxian flagship into oblivion. For a moment, the entire battlefield seemed to pause. The Vraxian flagship Vengeance, once the symbol of their unstoppable might, was gone, consumed by its own weapon. The remaining Vraxian ships, now leaderless and caught in the aftershock of the collapsed singularity, were left vulnerable. Jake Mallory leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat as the data streamed in. The Vengeance had fallen, and with it, the core of the Vraxian war machine had shattered. The counterattack was complete. But Earth's victory was not guaranteed. The remaining Vraxian ships, dozens of them, were still formidable, and their fury was now at its peak. Soroth, though shattered, was far from finished. His fleet, though crippled, was still capable of one final decisive strike. The war was on the edge of a knife. Earth had survived, but the Vraxians would not surrender so easily. For both sides, the end was in sight. But who would emerge victorious? The battle for Earth had reached its final phase. The Vengeance's destruction had shattered the heart of the Vraxian fleet, but their remaining ships, though disorganized and leaderless, were still formidable. General Soroth, though deeply wounded, was not the type to accept defeat. The Vraxians, driven by survival instinct and a brutal desire for vengeance, were determined to show that even in the face of annihilation, they could still destroy Earth. But the tides had irrevocably shifted. Humanity had tasted victory, and with it, a newfound strength. The Vraxians had underestimated them, believing Earth's technological advancements to be primitive, their military capabilities insufficient. They were wrong. What the Vraxians hadn't accounted for was humanity's indomitable spirit, its ability to adapt, to innovate under pressure. And now they were about to see what Earth could truly do when cornered. The remaining Vraxian warships moved into formation, their final assault an act of desperation. Soroth's face, once filled with the pride of empire, now bore the unmistakable mark of rage and humiliation. He had lost everything, the fleet, the flagship, and his own reputation. This final push was not just about military strategy. It was personal. The Vraxians had been dealt a blow that would echo through their entire empire for generations. But Earth had prepared for this. The quantum core, having stabilized the gravitational fields around the collapsing singularity, had sent a ripple effect throughout the system. The Vraxians may have been left with numbers, but Earth had something they had never expected: collaboration. The human race, united in the face of annihilation, had rallied its best minds and resources to create not just weapons of war, but a unified strategy that was far beyond what any single species could have anticipated. As the Vraxian fleet prepared for its last charge, the Earth fleet emerged from the shadows, cloaked and scattered across the battlefield. Their stealth technology, honed and perfected over the course of the war, had made them ghost-like entities in the void of space. Earth's ships began to circle the Vraxian forces, each warship working in concert, a deadly ballet of precision. "Ready the final quantum disruptors," Jake Mallory ordered. His voice, calm and collected, cut through the chaos in the command center. "Target the reactor cores of their remaining ships. This ends now." The quantum disruptors were Earth's final weapon, designed not just to disable, but to tear apart the very fabric of the Vraxian war machines. The Earth fleet's attacks were calculated to target the weak points of the Vraxian ships, exploiting their vulnerabilities in ways the Vraxians never could have predicted. As the disruptors powered up, the first of the Vraxian dreadnoughts exploded in a burst of energy, its reactor core destabilizing under the sheer force of the quantum wave. The shockwave sent debris flying in all directions, tearing through the remaining Vraxian vessels. One by one, the once mighty ships fell, each disintegrating into a cloud of molten metal and burning wreckage. The final battle was over. The Vraxian fleet had been annihilated. But the victory came at a cost. Earth's fleet, though victorious, had sustained heavy losses. The cost of this battle, lives lost, resources depleted, was staggering. Yet, as the remnants of the Vraxian forces scattered into the void, a sense of quiet triumph settled over Earth. They had not only survived, but had secured their place in the galaxy. The Vraxians, who had once ruled with an iron fist, had learned a brutal lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council, once a distant, indifferent entity, watched in stunned silence as Earth's fleet returned home. No longer would Earth be a small, insignificant planet on the edge of the galaxy. No longer would they be treated as a backwater species, vulnerable to the whims of greater powers. Jake Mallory looked out from the command center, the stars stretching endlessly before him. He knew the war had changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans had proven they could not only survive, they could dominate. And now, as Earth took its first steps into a larger galactic stage, there was no question left. Humanity had not only earned its place in the stars, it had carved out its own future, unshackled and free. The galaxy would now have to reckon with the unstoppable force that was Earth. The age of humanity had begun.